in a remote stretch of South African savanna where the sun scorches the earth by day and cold winds howl through the dry grass at night, a male lion and a female lion had lived freely for years. They were an enduring pair, hunting together across the endless plains where the male's thunderous roar echoed as a declaration of supreme power while the lioness, with her quiet resilience, remained his indispensable companion. Their life had once been peaceful, mornings spent chasing swift antelope, afternoons resting beneath the shade of ancient baobab trees, and evenings stretched out together under a starlit sky. But then everything changed, as if nature itself had resolved to test their strength and unity. The climate turned harsher than ever before. The sun, once a warm source of life, became a brutal enemy, searing the ground and drying up the small rivers that once trickled through the grasslands. The lush green expanses of old were reduced to cracked, barren patches, with yellowed grass stretching out like a carpet of death. Herds of antelope and zebra, their familiar prey, grew scarce. Some perished from lack of water, while others migrated far away in search of refuge. The two lions were forced to travel farther, trekking across desolate terrain to find food, but each journey brought only disappointment. One day, after catching nothing but a scrawny hare, too small to ease the gnawing hunger in their bellies, the male lion raised his head high, inhaling the arid wind that swept past. His golden eyes scanned the distant horizon where thin clouds hovered like a faint promise. Beside him stood the lioness, her dull coat caked with dust and hunger, her gaze weary yet burning with unwavering faith in her mate. No words were needed for them to understand that staying here meant they wouldn't survive the brutal dry season. And so their journey began. The lions abandoned their familiar territory, a place once marked by resounding roars and deep claw scars on withered trees. They trudged through parched grasslands, climbed bare hills stripped of shade, and crossed dusty trails baked to a blistering heat by the sun. The male led the way, his powerful legs moving with unshakable resolve, his sharp eyes scanning for threats, ready to face any danger. His dark mane fluttered in the wind like a banner of triumph amid the desolation. The lioness followed, her steps slower from exhaustion, but showing no sign of surrender. At times, they paused by murky puddles lingering in the cracked earth, sipping meager gulps to stave off collapse. The water was filthy and scarce, but it was all they had. Their trek stretched across weeks, each day a new trial. Some days, they found nothing to eat, resting instead beneath skeletal trees, their breaths heavy in the stifling heat. Occasionally, the male would venture off alone to hunt, only to return with empty eyes and an emptier stomach. The lioness waited in silence, never complaining, offering a gentle lick to his face as comfort when he came back. Once they stumbled upon a pack of hyenas in a desolate field. The hyenas, outnumbering them and just as ravenous, charged with shrill, chilling cries. Without hesitation, the male roared, a sound that shook the air, and leapt into battle to protect his mate. He stood between her and the pack, claws slashing through the air, teeth gleaming as they sank into flesh. The lioness stepped back, her eyes locked on him with worry, knowing she couldn't interfere. This was his fight. The clash was fierce, blood staining the dry sand. And when the hyenas finally fled, the male returned with oozing bite marks on his shoulder and leg. The lioness approached, tenderly licking his wounds, her warm breath a silent reassurance amid the wreckage. After nearly a month of wandering through a dying landscape, a cool breeze suddenly swept through, carrying the scent of fresh water and life. The male lifted his head, nostrils flaring, ears twitching as if sensing hope. The lioness looked up, following his gaze, her weary legs picking up pace. They pressed on, crossing a low ridge, until a new land unfolded before them, Mikado National Park. This vast sanctuary stretched out with vibrant green grasslands, winding rivers glinting under the sun, and the calls of countless wild creatures filling the air. As they stepped into it, the male stood tall on a small rise, breathing in the scent of renewal. His mane flowed proudly, his eyes sweeping the scene as if claiming it as their new home. The lioness, exhausted from the journey, collapsed onto a patch of soft grass, her eyes half closed as she savored a rare moment of peace. She let out a soft sigh, a release of the pain and hunger of days past. Mikado National Park was unlike anywhere they'd been. The air was crisp, fragrant with fresh grass and wildflowers. Antelope bounded across the plains, zebras grazed by the riverbanks, and birds sang from lush treetops. The male paced slowly, his claws leaving deep prints in the moist soil, a sign he was ready to stake his claim. He stopped at a towering acacia, raking its trunk with sharp scratches, a bold declaration, "This is mine." Then he threw back his head and roared, the deep, rolling sound rippling across the savanna, scattering birds and startling small prey. It was more than a claim of power. It was a song of victory after months of struggle. The lioness, though fatigued, began exploring in her own way. She walked along the riverbank, eyes studying every bush and shadow, memorizing the terrain for future hunts. Cool water washed over her paws, rinsing the dust from her faded coat. She drank deeply, feeling vitality seep back into her body, then settled beneath a baobab tree, listening to the wind rustle the leaves and the river's gentle flow. Occasionally, she glanced at the male, her eyes glowing with trust and gratitude. Together, they cheated death, and now they stood in a land promising new life. Little did they know, it wasn't just the wild welcoming them, humans were watching from afar. Tabo and Lorado, two dedicated rangers, had already noticed the newcomers. Tabo, a tall man with over a decade of patrol experience, always wore a weathered baseball cap he called his lucky charm. He loved the savanna like a second home, having faced everything from rescuing injured birds to chasing off poachers. Lorado, petite but brimming with energy, was the reserve's best wildlife observer. With a notebook always at her side, she documented every detail of animal life, from migration patterns to breeding habits. One morning, as Tabo drove along the central river, he slammed on the brakes and pointed at the ground. "Look at this, Lorado," he said, excitement in his voice. There, in the damp sand, were large, distinct lion tracks. Lorado knelt, brushing her fingers over them, then looked up with a grin. "We've got new visitors." They decided to track the pair from a distance, cruising slowly along trails, keeping far enough not to spook them. Through binoculars, they spotted the male atop a rise, his black mane majestic in the wind, and the lioness resting in the shade, panting as if she just crossed a marathon. Over time, the lions adapted to their new home. The male's roars rang out at night, staking his territory across the plains. The lioness began hunting, though still wary of unseen dangers. Tabo and Lorado watched from afar, marveling at their strength while worrying about their health after such a grueling journey. One afternoon, as golden sunlight bathed the grasslands, Lorado noticed something odd. The lioness moved sluggishly, pausing to catch her breath, her belly visibly swollen. "Do you think she's pregnant?" she whispered to Tabo. He peered through the binoculars, noting how the male stayed close, his gaze protective. "Could be," he replied. "If so, we're about to witness a miracle." The lioness's belly grew, her steps heavier with each day. Tabo started carrying a medical kit in the truck, birthing aids, supplements, basic tools, though he wasn't sure he'd dare use them. Lions aren't house pets. He joked with Lorado, but his eyes betrayed his seriousness. Lorado tracked the pair daily, noting every detail: how long the lioness rested, how often she ate, how the male guarded her. She observed him not just hunting for himself but bringing food back for her, a rare behavior in wild lions. "There's something special," she said, voice full of awe. Word of the lions spread through the reserve. Staff placed playful bets on how many cubs she'd have, while Tabo and Lorado quietly hoped for the best. But then, the unthinkable happened. The lioness showed signs of labor, but something was wrong. She lay on the grass, groaning for hours, her body trembling in agony. The male paced around her, occasionally roaring as if helpless before her suffering. From a distance, Tabo and Lorado saw the crisis through their binoculars. "She's been in pain too long," Lorado said, her voice shaking. "If we don't help, she and the cubs might not make it." They huddled in the truck, debating fast. Tranquilizing her risked harming the birth process. Sedating him could make him aggressive when he woke. "We've got one shot," Tabo said, eyes resolute. "We go in directly." Lorado nodded, heart pounding with nerves. It was a gamble, but they couldn't watch life slip away. As the sun dipped low, Tabo drove closer than ever. Through the window, they saw the lioness lying on her side, gasping, and the male standing guard, mane bristling, eyes blazing in the twilight. When the truck stopped, he roared, a bone-rattling warning. Tabo took a deep breath, stepped out unarmed, hands bare to avoid provocation. Lorado followed, clutching the medical bag, fighting to stay calm. "Talk to him," Tabo whispered. She nodded, speaking softly. "We're just here to help. Don't be afraid." The male advanced, growling, but didn't charge. Maybe he sensed their intent, or perhaps he was too focused on his mate to care. Lorado edged toward the lioness, kneeling a few steps away. The lioness lifted her head, eyes clouded with pain, but didn't resist. "Good girl," Lorado murmured, hands trembling as she pulled out a birthing aid injection. She touched the lioness's belly, feeling strong but ineffective contractions, a difficult labor. She administered the shot quickly, then backed off, pulling Tabo with her to the truck. The male watched, never breaking his stare, but didn't pursue. They waited in silence, the only sounds the wind through the grass and the lioness's faint moans. After an agonizing hour, a tiny cry broke through, weak but alive. A cub emerged, small and wet, sprawled on the grass. The male approached, gently licking his offspring, while the lioness exhaled, her eyes lighting with joy after the ordeal. Tabo laughed, clapping Lorado's shoulder. "We did it." Through binoculars, Lorado confirmed the cub was moving well. She made one more brief approach to give the lioness a nutrient shot. Then they retreated, leaving the family to their sacred moment. The next day, driving by, they saw the lions atop a rise. The male and female gazed toward the truck as if offering a silent nod. The cub toddled around its mother, tumbling in the grass but scrambling up with innocent squeaks. The male didn't growl, standing proud, mane flowing as if accepting their presence in his world. Lorado wrote in her notebook, "They're the toughest family I've ever seen." Tabo nodded, adding, "And we're part of their story." The tale of the lion's courage and Tabo and Lorado's dedication spread through the reserve, inspiring all who cherished the wild. As time passed, the cub grew, learning to hunt with its mother and roar with its father. Under a radiant dawn, the lion family stood on the savanna, a symbol of resilient life amid relentless trials. And whenever Tabo and Lorado's truck rolled by, the lions still glanced their way, a quiet thank you to those who'd saved them in their darkest hour, leaving an indelible mark on Mikado's heart.